Ben, you know something? This is the first time I've ever been on a red tractor. When I grew up, we had a different brand of tractors that I learned how to drive on. But if I was going to buy a red tractor, I sure would use my Farm Bureau benefits in order to purchase one. So tell me, why do you have me up here on a red tractor today?
So here we are at Huber Equipment in Ashland, just west of Interstate 95. It's ironic that we're west of 95 because we're here to talk about our red issues that we found in the Watershed Implementation Plan, or issues where we have serious concerns. And one of those proposals is to expand the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area from its current footprint of east of 95 to west of 95, making it a statewide preservation area. Since 1988, this area has only been east of 95, and with the TMDLs in place, we don't think we need to expand this regulation to the whole state. That's confusing for farmers and localities. And Martha, speaking of water quality, I think you had an issue you wanted to talk about.
You know, it's kind of the same thing. They're misapplying kind of concepts within some of these recommendations. And one that we believe that they've misapplied the research on is having a recommendation that we utilize bioreactors for groundwater springs. Virginia Cooperative Extension did some research and they released it in November of 2018, and they did it at our Eastern Shore AREC, and it's good research, but it applies to coastal plain, and now they want to direct it to karst and groundwater springs. It's also an overreach. They're trying to bring in authority for groundwater under this Chesapeake Bay TMDL. Talking about the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, the next set of issues I wanted to share with people was the concern about the lack of funding and or premature actions. So the first one is they want to set tillage management practices covering 70% of all ag land, including hay and pasture, receiving manure. Again, do we have enough funding to even do this? When the funding's been provided, farmers have implemented these practices. Also, we believe this is the first step towards a permitting system for farmers. They also want to have 85% of implementation on nutrient management plans on cropland acres. Our farmers are already using nutrient management plans, but it may not be in their system and it may not be being counted. And because it's not being counted, they want to ask for legislation to mandate that this be done by a certain date. And again, we feel like that's premature. When the funding's been available, farmers have been willing to report and utilize nutrient management plans. Speaking of nutrient management plan, they also want to mandate that all ag operations over 50 acres have a nutrient management plan. Well, this could be really unfair to our small farmers. If they go into a soil and water conservation district and this provision ranks higher than their provisions, they may not be eligible for any funding. And right now, we need to help anybody and everybody that qualifies for these programs with conservation practices. Speaking of premature, don't you have an issue that's a little bit premature as well?
I do, yeah. And this, in the WIP, there's a proposal to make livestock stream fencing mandatory for all intermittent and perennial streams. Livestock stream fencing is a great thing when there's funding available for it, but as we saw in 2015 when soil and water conservation districts provided 100% cost share, farmers were eager and willing to put in stream fencing, but this led to a nearly 5-year backlog in state funds. That's not such a huge deal when it's voluntary, but when it's mandatory and the state doesn't step up and provide the funds that are needed, then that leaves farmers holding the bag for this new regulation. Speaking of livestock, Martha, I think you want to talk about some equine provisions.
Yeah, Ben, there's 2 equine provisions that we are really concerned about. The first is mandating a stocking rate for the eligibility for equine operations to qualify for the BACS program. And in our opinion, this is a very dangerous pathway to go down because we do not have that same eligibility stocking rate requirement for livestock, and now we're going to apply this to equine. Plus, every equine operation is very, very different. They're utilizing an assumption that equine are on a pasture-based system as far as feeding, and that's just not the case. And so therefore, that's why we just think that that should not occur within this proposal. Also, they want to allow local governments to set the land area for equine operations. local governments have some very broad zoning authority now, and in some cases they do have provisions with regards to animal units. But we don't believe that those provisions need to be expanded any further, because it could create a confusion within your local government zoning restrictions. Ben, there was an interesting issue that you had with regards to citizens. What was that?
Yeah, the draft whip proposes encouraging citizens to be part of pollution patrols. We would think that in the citizen portion of the whip, it would talk more about how private landowners and homeowners can improve soil and water conditions on their property, not encourage these pollution patrols. So these patrols would encourage citizens to go out and either by water or by land patrol and inspect agricultural operations and report if they see something that they think is out of line. Yet it provides no training or certification for these people. So does it lead to a situation where there could be more false reports leading to issues and inspections on farms? Next thing I want to talk about is also related to reporting and poultry litter reporting. Previously, poultry operators were required to keep logs of the litter produced and the amount transported over a certain amount. In the draft whip, not only would the farmer producing the litter have to keep reports, but also the farmer receiving the litter would have to keep reports, and it would be mandatory that they send these reports up to one of the Commonwealth's agencies. And we think it's a little concerning that both the producer and the end user are reporting on each other's operations. Farmers should report on their own operation, not someone else's. And the last issue I want to talk about is nutrient management provisions related to erosion and sediment control. Erosion and sediment control regs are designed to regulate the loss of soil off of a property, not the nutrients that are applied on that property. And we think we need to understand more about the feasibility of how this would be regulated under the WIP. And Martha, you want to close this out?
Sure. So the last issue I want to talk about is, years ago, the Agriculture, Forestry, Industries Development Fund was created. And it was really created to provide small grants to agribusinesses and forestry operations that are trying to expand and grow jobs, but may not qualify for other economic development tools. They want to add a provision to establish a priority for nursery operations to be able to grow plants needed for urban stormwater BMPs. That in itself is a great idea. Here's where we're concerned. We're concerned that if we turn this program into a water quality, then other types of agribusinesses that could benefit from these grants would no longer qualify. And so we're raising our hand saying we really need to question how this is worded, and at this point oppose it until we get that clarification. Ben, you can see there's a number of issues that we are really concerned and likely to oppose outright. We're going to be asking our members to respond to action alerts next week, and even after we submit comments, this is not over. There's going to be a number of issues coming before the next General Assembly. So we appreciate you all listening, and stay in touch with regards to the next steps.